Mr. Speaker, may I move that the House consider a bill for an act to provide for protection of persons who render reasonable assistance during emergency situations occurring at places within federal jurisdiction and to serve as a model to be adopted by states of the Federation and for related matters, HB 171. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
A bill for an act to provide for the protection of persons who render reasonable assistance during emergency situations occurring at places within federal jurisdiction and to serve as a model to be adopted by the states of the Federation and for related matters, House Bill 171, and I invite Hon Babajimi Benson to speak to the report.
That protection is granted to people who render reasonable assistance during the time of emergency. Mr. Chairman, I've looked at various enactments in various jurisdictions of the world. A lot of countries have this piece of legislation, and I realize that there's a difference in Nigeria. This is what propelled me in putting forward this bill. The bill seeks to provide protection to people who reasonably assist others in an emergency. In some jurisdictions, sir, it is an offense if you see a man in need and you don't assist. It's punishable by a fine or a term of imprisonment. This bill is divided into 5 sections. The first one talks about the general immunity granted to people who assist. The second speaks to where the law will be applicable. The third talks about consent, to whom the assistance is rendered. The fourth is the interpretation, which defines assistance and emergency. The fifth is the citation, and the last is the explanatory memorandum. So, Mr. Chairman, it will be my great pleasure if this is passed with the speed of light. Thank you very much, sir. India, for instance, there was an issue that happened. A child was run over by a car. But because the citizens of India were scared to go and assist the child, within another hour, another car ran over the same child, which killed the child. So what we're saying here is that at times, the need to obtain consent for the victim might be difficult at that time. It is your humanitarian or your good Samaritan gesture that would save that child or victim at that time. So, but at times, some people might be crying for assistance, which means consent is implied. So we've used the first page where he mentioned, and we've used the second page where the definition of consent comes in to cover any inadequacies that there is. Thank you.
Clause 2. On clause. Okay. Abiante.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Clause 2 deals with application. And in trying to define the areas where these laws will apply, we have obviously excluded one very terrible area that Nigerians have experienced in recent time. I can't find anywhere here that speaks to the failures in structural integrity of buildings.
In what?
If there's a building collapse, it simply means that that is not an emergency as speculated by this act.
It is an emergency.
It is not so provided for with regards to application.
If you study the bill itself, it's only trying to make sure that it does not go into areas that does not belong to the federal government. The law is being made here, and whatever law we make here should strictly apply to jurisdiction where the federal government has is say on. So it's not an oversight, and there is a building collapse definitely in that vicinity. Either the local government, both the local government and the state, will within their capacity, mobilize rescue operation to such building collapse.
I do understand, Mr. Chairman, but I think it should be provided for. Because the federal government can as well have buildings outside of the federal capital territory. And when there is that need, it is excluded by this bill that we are considering.
It's still going to be done by the state. But let's listen to.
Is already provided for. And the reason why I think the expressly provided from A up till J, they named all those places specifically, is such so that we avoid any ambiguity. And lastly, sir, F, at such ports as may be declared by the National Assembly to be federal ports. But I think he's, on the whole, he has made some reasonable observations. We can include outside the federal capital territory all federal government structures. I think it will properly take care of his concern.
Those against say nay. The ayes have it. So clause 2 as amended, clause 3, clause 4, clause 5. Explanatory memorandum, long title of the bill. Goni, reports passed. Leader, move that we go back to the plenary
to report progress.
The House, in the committee of the whole, considered a report on a bill for an act to provide for protection of persons who render reasonable assistance during emergency situations occurring at places within federal jurisdiction and to serve as a model to be adopted by states of the Federation, and for related matters, approved clause 2 as amended, approved clauses 3 through 5, the explanatory memorandum, and long title of the bill.